In 2017, PSG paid 222 million euros for Neymar, the best player in the world at the time. Today, that same money buys a 20-year-old with one good season behind him. This isn't inflation, it's accounting. To understand why a 20-year-old now costs 100 million, you have to go back to one afternoon in August 2017. Paris Saint-Germain walked into Barcelona and paid Neymar's release clause in full. 222 million euros. And there's a detail most people miss about that day. Barcelona didn't agree to sell. They couldn't refuse. Under Spanish law, every professional player's contract in Spain must contain a buyout clause, a fixed price at which the player can walk. It isn't a negotiating position, it's a legal right. Barcelona had set Neymar's at 222 million, a number they assumed was absurd enough that nobody would ever reach it. PSG reached it. The previous world record was Paul Pogba, around 105 million euros to Manchester United 1 year earlier. PSG didn't beat that record. They more than doubled it. And that single payment did something almost nobody understood at the time. It didn't just set a new ceiling, it moved the floor, because 222 million euros didn't disappear. It landed in Barcelona's bank account. And Barcelona now needed a replacement. Immediately, publicly, and desperately, every selling club in Europe knew exactly how much money Barcelona was holding. Liverpool held firm on Philippe Coutinho for 5 months. Barcelona eventually paid a base fee of around 120 million euros, rising past 145 million once add-ons were included. In the same period, PSG committed roughly 180 million euros for an 18-year-old at Monaco named Kylian Mbappe. Around 145 million guaranteed, the rest in bonuses. In a single year, football's price list was rewritten from top to bottom. But here's the part that actually mattered. The 222 million wasn't just a large number. It was proof of a principle. If a wealthy club truly wants your player, there is no reasonable price. There is only the price they will eventually agree to pay. Selling clubs learned that lesson permanently. A player who would have cost 30 million became 60. A 60 million player became 90. And then came the deals that followed. Antony to Manchester United for around 95 million. Joao Felix to Atletico Madrid for 126. Mykhailo Mudryk to Chelsea for a fee rising toward 100 million. Those weren't valuations anymore. They were auctions with one bidder who couldn't walk away. But none of this was possible before someone changed the rules. And the two changes that built modern football didn't happen in a boardroom. One happened in a courtroom. December 1995, a Belgian midfielder named Jean-Marc Bosman took his own club to the European Court of Justice. His contract had expired. He wanted to move to a French club. His club refused to let him leave unless the French side paid a transfer fee for a player they no longer had under contract. The court sided with Bosman. And inside the European Union, football's oldest assumption collapsed. A club no longer owned a player once the contract ended. The consequences were immediate, and they were not what anyone expected. Players could now walk away for free. So clubs did two things to stop it. They started paying dramatically higher wages to keep players happy, and they started signing them to much longer contracts. And once a player is locked into a long contract, the club holds all the leverage again. The buying club isn't paying for the player, it's paying to end a contract early. That is what a transfer fee actually is. Then came the money. In 1992, the newly formed Premier League sold its television rights to Sky for £304 million across 5 seasons. At the time, it was considered an enormous gamble. 3 decades later, the Premier League's domestic broadcast deal alone was worth around £6.7 billion over 4 years, and that is before international rights, which are now worth more than the domestic package. This is why the financial gap isn't between big clubs and small clubs anymore. It's between England and everyone else. A mid-table Premier League club can now out-earn and outspend clubs playing in the Champions League semifinals, and then the ceiling moved one final time. In 2003, Roman Abramovich bought Chelsea. In 2008, Abu Dhabi's sovereign wealth bought Manchester City. These weren't businessmen looking for a return. For the first time, football clubs were owned by entities for whom the transfer market simply wasn't a financial constraint. When one buyer in the market has effectively unlimited resources, price stops being a negotiation and becomes a question of desire. Free agency created the leverage, television created the money, state ownership removed the ceiling entirely. Everything after this, every £100 million teenager, is a consequence of those three things arriving within the same 40 years. Which brings us to the strangest change of all. Football stopped paying for what a player had already done and started paying for what he might do. For most of football's history, the most expensive players in the world were in their late 20s. They were proven. They had won things. They had performed at the highest level for several consecutive seasons. Buying one was expensive, but it was relatively safe. You knew exactly what you were getting. Today, a sporting director would rather spend 120 million on a 20-year-old than 60 million on a proven 28-year-old. That decision looks irrational. It isn't. It's just not a football decision. Because the 20-year-old isn't being bought as a player. He's being bought as an asset. Here's the logic. He signs a long contract. 6, 7, sometimes 8 years. During that time, he is expected to improve. And critically, his value on the balance sheet is protected by his age. Even if he never becomes a superstar, at 24 he can still be sold to someone else. The 28-year-old has none of that protection. He might be the better player today, but he is a depreciating asset. Past 30, resale value collapses. No matter how good he still is, no matter what he is winning. One player is a purchase, the other is an investment. And this is where football's incentives quietly inverted. The moment a young player puts together one outstanding season, the market treats it as proof of what he will become, not evidence of what he has done. A single breakout campaign in Germany or France is now enough to move a valuation into 9 figures. Selling clubs understand this perfectly. They no longer price a player on his career. They price him on his projection, on what they believe someone will pay in 2 years' time. And buying clubs no longer wait, because everybody in the market knows the same thing. Waiting one more season doesn't get you a better assessment. It gets you a higher price. So clubs rush in after a few good months, paying a premium for potential on the assumption that the premium will be even larger next year. This is a market where the safest financial decision and the safest football decision are now opposites, and football chose the financial one. Here's what almost nobody explains. The number on a transfer isn't a valuation. It's a line on a balance sheet. And once you understand how that line works, the madness starts making sense. In 2013, the Premier League introduced profit and sustainability rules, the limit. A club may lose no more than £105 million across any rolling 3-year period. Breach it, and you risk a points deduction, as Everton and Nottingham Forest both discovered. So clubs stopped thinking like football teams and started thinking like accountants. Here's the first mechanism, and it's the one that explains almost everything. When a club signs a player for £100 million, it does not record £100 million as an expense that year. The fee is amortized, spread evenly across the length of the contract. 100 million over a 5-year deal becomes 20 million a year on the books. The club pays the same money. The accounts show a fifth of it. Chelsea took this to its logical conclusion. Across 2022 and 2023, they handed out contracts of 7 years, 8 years, even 8.5. That same £100 million fee spread across 8 years becomes 12.5 million a year. The player didn't get cheaper. The accounting did. Now the second mechanism, and this one matters more because it reaches down into every level of the sport. When a club sells a player it originally bought, only the profit above his remaining book value counts as a gain. Buy him for 50, sell him 2 years later for 60, and the profit isn't 10 million. It's the difference against whatever is left on the books. But an academy graduate has no book value at all. He costs nothing to acquire. So when a homegrown player is sold, almost the entire fee is recorded as immediate, pure profit. That creates an extraordinary incentive. If a club is approaching the limit, selling one academy graduate can solve the entire problem in a single transaction, not reduce it, solve it. And the accounting year ends on June the 30th. In the summer of 2024, in the days before that date, Premier League clubs completed a flurry of deals involving young, homegrown players. Chelsea, Aston Villa, Everton, and Newcastle all improved their financial position before the books closed. Newcastle sold Elliot Anderson, a player from their own academy, to Nottingham Forest for £35 million. Every one of those deals was completely legal, but they had a consequence nobody priced in. Once a squad player is worth 30 million and an academy graduate is worth 40, what does an established starter cost? What does a young international cost? The answer inevitably was more. The floor had moved again, and this time it moved from the bottom up. And this is the point where creative accounting stopped being clever and started getting clubs punished. Because some of them didn't just bend the rules, they ran out of rules to bend. In January 2023, Italian football authorities docked Juventus 15 points, mid-season, over how the club had accounted for player transfers. The mechanism was called plusvalenze, capital gains. Two clubs agreed to swap players, each valued far above what anyone would actually pay. No significant money changes hands, but both clubs book a large paper profit, and both spread the incoming cost across several years of amortization. Two clubs, one afternoon, and both balance sheets improve. On paper, nothing happened. In the accounts, everything did. The penalty was later revised to 10 points, but the point had been made. The transfer market had become a place where value could be manufactured. Meanwhile, in Spain, Barcelona faced a different version of the same problem and reached for a different instrument. In 2022, unable to register players they had already signed, Barcelona began selling their own future. 25% of their La Liga television revenue for the next 25 years sold to an investment firm, then a portion of their production company. The club called them economic levers. What they were, in practice, was future income converted into present-day spending power. And in England, clubs found their own version. Chelsea sold 2 hotels they owned at Stamford Bridge, to a company owned by their own owners. Then, the following year, they sold their women's team to another company owned by their own owners. Money moved from one pocket to another pocket belonging to the same trousers, and a profit appeared in the accounts. The Premier League responded by tightening the rules on related party transactions, requiring such deals to be tested against fair market value. Notice the pattern every single time. UEFA capped amortisation at 5 years, no matter how long the contract runs. On paper, closed. In practice, it meant clubs could no longer soften enormous fees across a decade. So buyers needed cleaner deals, and sellers responded by demanding larger guaranteed fees up front. The rule designed to cool the market pushed base prices higher. Then came the squad cost ratio, limiting combined spending on wages, transfer fees, and agent commissions to 70% of revenue. And that rule quietly did something too. A 20-year-old costing $100 million earns far less in wages than an established superstar, so he fits inside the ratio more easily. A regulation intended to restrain spending made unproven players even more attractive. Every rule so far has produced the same result. It changed the shape of the spending. It has never reduced it, which is why clubs stopped waiting altogether. They're signing prospects at 16 and 17. They're buying entire clubs in other countries so they can reach talent before the market prices it. Because the cost of waiting one more year is that the price doubles. So when the next fee lands, and it makes no sense to you, it probably makes perfect sense to someone, just not to a football fan. What is the most indefensible transfer fee you have ever seen? Drop it in the comments. Subscribe. We keep digging into the stories nobody else is covering properly.